I'm Millie Bradshaw.
Stacy Bradshaw.
And this is Dry Creek Livestock in Woodruff, Utah.
We're just here to kind of see what they're doing with this brush. Like this rabbit brush plant, for instance, that was one of the first things they went to. You can see where they have bitten the top of that plant off. Rabbit brush is pretty non-palatable to most everything. It's pretty amazing that they're actually eating it, but we've seen it quite often.
So that for anybody that is not local or is not knowledgeable about the plants in this area, the gray, is this sage we're looking at?
That is sage, yeah.
Okay.
Here, I will step over the fence here if I don't trip and fall. This would be the rabbit brush here. This would just be a sage.
And then what are the grasses? The ones that look so pretty waving in the breeze there?
This here
Crested wheat.
is crested wheat. We have a couple of different varieties of grass here on the place. We got a crested wheat, Russian wild rye, a specific strain of Russian wild rye. And we actually come across a Timothy plant out here not long ago. I wish we had a lot more of it, but we don't.
So this whole area here was farmed several decades ago, and they actually had wheel lines on it, and it didn't work out that great. There was some other issues with water rights and things, and so they quit farming it and they planted it to crested wheat. And crested wheat's beneficial in a lot of ways, but there's some drawbacks too. So later on after that, they planted in Bozoyski ryegrass, and that's what the really tall stuff is down below. So our goal up here is to build soil. So we're using the goats in an intensive grazing fashion in these 100 square foot or 100 feet by 100 feet squares to fertilize, eat down the brush, eat down the grass, stimulate growth, and hopefully build soil and some diversity in this area. Higher up, we have a little more diversity where it wasn't farmed. We have some needle and thread in there. What else?
I'm not sure what all. We've got black sage.
Sage, those are tumbleweeds. Yeah. So we're trying to eat the weeds along the road also with the goats, and they usually do a pretty good job of that.
That's caused by disturbance of us building the road.
Is that also the Russian thistle? Is that the same thing? What they call Russian thistle?
This is not Russian thistle, no. But I'm sure we got some of that around here too.
But it's an invasive plant.
Yeah, yes.
Do the goats eat it?
Yeah, they will. They will. They'll eat musk thistle, Russian thistle. Depending on the year. What's that?
Canadian thistle.
Yeah, they'll eat about any of it. We've found down closer to the river we have large patches of stinging nettle, and they will devour that. We've even got a couple of patches of leafy spurge, which they will attack. They'll run over the top of you to get to that. And we've been monitoring the one patch of leafy spurge for a couple of years now, and it's noticeably decreasing in size and thickness. We're having a positive effect on it.
And that is a poisonous plant.
Yeah. For cattle, almost everything.
Yeah.
Goat's about the only thing that will eat it.
And do well on it.
Yeah, they will. I have been told that it is actually like 30% protein, that stuff, but it's poisonous to most everything.
So if the goats eat it, but it's poisonous to the cattle, then running them together is actually quite a benefit, I'm assuming.
Yes, yes. What we've done, whether or not we know for sure if it's the right way, but we've been following cattle with these goats. They will eat a lot of the different stuff than the cattle. Essentially, we're getting 2 paychecks off the same piece of grass or land, which works out real well, and hopefully we're improving the land.
So do the goats and the cattle have the same water needs?
What do you,
Do they both consume roughly per body weight the same amount of water, or do goats, pound per pound, use less water than cattle, or is it about the same?
I think it's pretty similar. They're pickier about their water. The cows will drink, the stuff that's kind of off on the river and kind of swampy, but the goats don't like that. So they're a little bit pickier about their water. So if we don't have a really good fresh, if they're not right on the river and they can't get fresh water off the river, then we need to provide another water source for them.
we haul a lot of water.
Yeah, we haul water for them.
I was very curious looking at the greenery here and us talking about the different kinds of plants. That's why the water is important in a way, is it not? Because it's not always this green.
No, this is a desert. We live in a desert, and
This is exceptional.
Exceptional year.
So these kids are all out of Cedar Eater Buck from Texas A&M. They have been really fantastic. We kidded this group in June. So luckily, because we still had tons of snow in May, we didn't start kidding till June, and we actually had very minimal death loss, which, it's a lucky year. We kind of count on some loss, but I think we only lost 1 kid at kidding. Vigorous kids, they're up and going. That little dude right there is on the rabbit brush already, right there. So these guys are 4 to 6 weeks old. The reason we keep them in the electric netting and have a dog with them is because we have eagles that are nesting across the way in those trees right there. And the eagles will pick off the kids. So the dog does a great job, and usually we have a pair of dogs in with the kids, because one will watch the perimeter and one will watch the sky, and they don't let anything near them. So as far as we know, we haven't lost any to eagles yet. The fence is a strong predator protection, but the dogs are a huge part of that. And ultimately, we want to get to where we don't have to have this level of protection for them, and the dogs can handle it. That's the goal. But we have predator pressure from coyotes. Along the river especially, there's mountain lions that kind of trail that territorially. And there's been wolves spotted close by, not here, but close by, within a few miles. There's foxes, kind of all the regulars. Got some bobcats around here, but the dogs in the fence are really, really good. It's a lot of work to do the fence and the dogs. So we're trying to see what is sufficient. What do we need to protect them? What can we let go of? And it's going to be dependent on where we have them. Down on the river, we need the fence right now because of the mountain lions. So most of these in here have some boar influence in them. All the kids are sired by a boar buck. There's Spanish type goats, but they're crossbred. But I would say mostly in here we have Spanish and boar. So this is temporary electric netting that we get from Premier One, and we have like 1,400 feet of this, and we move it around on a daily basis. So they will only be in here for a day, and then they'll get moved. We have some that's a little bit taller, it's semi-permanent, and we have the buck pen way down there is semi-permanent. That just is a little more protection if over jumping predators. The wires are a little closer together, and that we leave up through the winter. That works really good in the winter. As far as we have what we call a night trap, and that's right down here by the barn. It's 5 foot tall non-climb horse fence, which is 2x4 squares, and then it has a hot wire around the inside to keep the goats from rubbing on the fence and destroying the fence. And that is really great as far as protecting them from predators and everything. On our outside fence, it's just cattle fence for the most part. We have some sheep netting, but mostly it's just like 5-strand barb. We plan on adding hot wires on the inside of this, about 1 foot high and then probably 2.5, maybe 3 feet high, so that we can start running them out a little more freely in here. That won't protect against predators. We're counting on the dogs for that, but it will hopefully keep them contained. That's the goal in the end. And ultimately, we want them to learn that that night trap is where their water is and where they need to spend the night, so they can go out and graze during the day, and then on their own at night they will come in and go into the night trap for water and to bed down. So that's the hope.
This electric netting is extremely labor intensive for us. And I'm not a huge proponent of electric fence, but it's doing the job for us. We actually have lost an animal or two that became entangled in it, but that's not very often. We have intentions of putting up a permanent fence around, a perimeter fence, mainly, like Millie said, so that we can allow these goats to graze on a little more natural rather than forcing them in a small area. And we're, far as that perimeter fence, we're looking at a goat-specific fence. It's a high tensile made by a company called Stay Tough that we're gonna put it to use. It's got some different size spacing in it. It's a net wire, but that's our intention is to have a fairly large perimeter, because, well, these barbed wire fences mean absolutely nothing to these goats, and this is cattle country, and the neighbors get a little out of sorts when they got 100 goats on them, and so keeping them in place is a huge issue.
So my question would be, if you fence the entirety of the pasture, I mean of the land that you have, would you still need to rotate the goats because they would stick with one spot and clean it out, or are they going to wander where their preferred thing is across the entire acreage?
From last summer, we allowed them to free range here, and they would cover an unbelievable amount of country. They wouldn't, not like cattle, they won't just camp in one spot and take it down. They travel and just constant move. And like I said, through the fence onto the neighbors, which they didn't like. But they really do pick. They're pretty selective. They will travel a large distance to find what they want.
There's that goat getting into that rabbit brush right there.
So how many dogs would you have for this particular size flock?
So the recommendation is 1 dog per 100 goats if you're on flat ground where they can see really well. So we have about 100 altogether. This is about 60 head in here, no, 40 head in here. But we have 2 dogs, just 1 running with this group. The other dog doesn't stay in the electric, so she has to be in the night trap. She jumps it. So we're still in the dog training capacity. That when they're together, they're better. But if she won't stay in the fence, we can't keep her out like that.
Okay, so you have how many goats in here?
So there are roughly 35 to 40 does in here, and there's about 60 kids.
That's amazing. If they're going to clear something like this in a day, 35 goats, that really says to your stocking levels on the entirety of the ranch, right? I mean, you have to have some serious acreage in order to support animals like this, or no? Will they still make it, just not quite as fat as they look now?
It's pretty variable, because there's not a lot of grass in there. So up in these brushier areas and up here on this higher ground, there's just not, I would say, half as much forage as even when you get down to there. So it's pretty variable. The higher up we get, the more brush we have, the less grass there is, the quicker they go through it. But of course in spring and fall, they'll be utilizing the brush more than the grass. So ideally, the cattle would get the grass and the goats would eat the brush. We're not quite there yet. We're working on it, but we're not there yet. But when we get down into the meadow, we can take like 4 sections of this fence and the goats are good for 3 weeks because there's so much forage and there's just so much volume of grass down there. Yeah. So it's really, really variable.
So how does this general region with goats, are they happy to have the goats in here? Is it a little difficult sometimes, or are the governmental organizations going to come to you and say,
I don't think so. I don't think government's an issue. It's more of a social issue because this is cattle country, and I was raised on a cattle ranch, and cattle people, I'm not going to say they don't like goats, but that's not their preference. And so they're like, what are they doing over there? It's more of a curiosity, and I think it makes them a little bit nervous. But I think education is the key to that. A huge benefit, and maybe the biggest benefit of goats as far as forage and biodiversity, is that the goats will eat the things that the cattle won't, and that keeps those things from out-competing the cattle beneficial forage. So that's the stuff that the cattle select. They go in there and they eat all that, and then they leave all the stuff, the weeds and the things that the goats will eat, but that stuff gets a competitive advantage unless you get goats on it. This short stuff, this is alyssum or desert madwort, and they will go right after that. One of the first things they go after when it's green. When it dries up, they're not as big of fans of it, but when it's green, they will go and just take that right to the ground.
All of those seeds.
Yep, there it went.
All of those seeds that are going to disperse.
Yes,
right?
yeah, but
it
they.
Might help now, but
so that stuff was in between all of these grass plants, and that's what they came and ate first.
Now, will this be right back up again in a little bit?
Depends on how much moisture we get. You know, some of it you can see down there. We got a bunch of moisture after we grazed, and it came up really fast. It just depends on the moisture situation. But then it'll get covered with snow and it'll come back in the spring. So,
so it all can work really nicely again with that cattle goat thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily going to be a competitor. It actually will help you.
Yeah, complementary. Yeah.
Yes.
So folks, what you see behind us here are the cows that are preceding the goats that will pass through these bottom pastures here as we get into the next few weeks of summer here. And this group of cattle behind us is, there's a combination there of cows and calves and short yearlings, just livestock or cows that they didn't want to take out onto the mountains for the summer, and so they kind of give them the premium end of the bottomlands where they don't have to travel very far. There's water, there's great feed right there, and so those cattle are the ones that are leading the way through here, taking that first pass through here, and the goats will then follow. In this particular setting, the goats follow later after the cattle have passed through there. So in some settings you can run them actually together, but what you're seeing in this case is in this management system, which works great, is to have them follow after the cattle have passed through these pastures, and so it really works as a great combination of cattle and goats going through these pastures to clean up these specific plants that we're really trying to improve, as well as give them an opportunity to really gain and put a set of kids out this fall that'll be primed for market.
Essentially, we've got 5 pastures on the place. We try not to graze the same pasture at the same time every year, so we start in a different location every year. This year we started up there on the hill. Mainly it's strictly range, sagebrush, cold season grasses, and we just rotate them through pasture to pasture to pasture till we get them to the meadow here, and where they will probably spend the majority of the rest of the grazing season there.
You want to talk about parasites and interspecies issues or benefits?
So one of the real benefits of having these animals co-grazing or follow grazing as they move from cattle through here to the goats. Those cattle will come in here and take the tops of those grasses off, and so they will clean up a lot of those plants that have a lot of the worm issues on them, and pass them right on through their systems. And then when the goats get in here, we have minimal problems with internal parasites on the goats. We still have external, and we still have some internal we deal with, especially on a year that's a little wetter like this one's been. Then we do have to manage for internal parasites. But this year we had such an amazingly heavy, record-setting winter here for snow that that's really resulted in a massive tick population, massive external parasites, and so those need to be managed separately, because that is an unusual problem this particular year. But there's some good synergies that come by having the cattle and the goats together for parasite management in terms of the way the pastures produce and the way they're grazed. Any thoughts on that, or any experiences either of you've had with that?
Tick load can definitely be an issue, and we've found ivermectin to be pretty successful in managing the ticks.
They don't seem to affect the goats as much as the horses. They're terrible on the horses. The goats do pretty well.
The guard dogs.
The guard dogs.
They
get a lot of ticks. We just don't have the parasite problems here that you see in a lot of like southern states where they just have a heavy parasite load. We'll have outliers. We'll have a goat that will have a heavy parasite load, and that's one that is on the cull list. We're managing and selecting for the goats that have less parasite problems. And I think the more brush they eat, the more sagebrush they eat, that helps eliminate parasites.
So how many different species are you planning on having here? Obviously, you have horses and cattle. List the animals that you have on the farm.
The horses are for my work, and hell, we got everything else you can imagine.
Right now, so we have horses for work. We don't own the cattle. We graze the cattle.
We sell the grass.
We sell the grass, basically. We graze them by the AUM. And then we have the goats, and then of course we have a bunch of 4-H animals. So my kids have pigs and lambs, and we have a bunch of chickens. We have meat chickens and layers.
We do actually have some calves.
We do. We have some calves that my daughter's raising, and then we have turkeys coming next week. Did you know that? Apparently he didn't.
This is sounding more like my marriage all the time.
You knew. They're Darcy's turkeys.
I didn't know.
Tom knew.
Yes.
He's getting one for Thanksgiving.
Well, this is some stretch of weather we've been having here, folks, isn't it?
Well, there you go. There's your comedic relief, Stace.
One thing we haven't mentioned is the amount of wildlife that we have here.
We feed a lot of wildlife.
Which, what we're doing here is real beneficial to them also. We've got antelope, pronghorn antelope, mule deer, elk, all. It's fairly common to see any of them any given month. In the wintertime, the elk come in here pretty heavy, which isn't necessarily favorable, but and the mule deer, we winter a lot of mule deer here on this place. And these goats utilizing brush will actually help stimulate that for the mule deer. They should thrive in that. So.
We've seeded in a lot of kochia on our disturbed areas because it establishes really fast, and the goats love it, but the deer also really like it. So up near our water, where our water system,
Cattle love it too.
Yeah, where the water system overflows, we have a pond there, so there's water access up there for wildlife, and so kind of all this grazing management also benefits the wildlife.
One of the things I don't know if we've talked about yet is the water system on this place. they have a great water system here that is all solar powered, and they've got a water source that pumps the water up to a tank up at the higher elevation on the farm, and then it gravity flows throughout these pastures. And so every pasture has a water source in it, and I don't know what the water pressure is down here at the very bottom, but up there at the house, Stacy tells me it's 80 pounds. So it'll make a hose stand straight out just off of that gravity flow. And again, it's all solar powered, so it's a permanent. It's powered all the time, and it's going all the time, and it works just really good. It served out throughout this last major winter without problems, and it's really brought a great improvement to the farm in terms of the way it can be grazed, in terms of the way you can manage these different pastures on a rotational basis. You're not dependent upon hauling water or upon snow or anything else to graze them and utilize them. So the water system here is a big deal, and it's really made a significant improvement to the overall productivity and the way the farm is managed with livestock.
We get the question a lot on water issues, and people saying, hey, there's no place that I can easily plug something in. So how much of a distance from your water source and how much lift do you have? And if I can ask, how much does a system like that, at least now in 2023, cost for just a basic pumping system? Do you know?
Cost, I can't answer that question. The other, I'm lifting about 300 feet. We have a well that is 268 feet deep. The pump is hanging at 150 feet, and it's lifting from that pump about 300 feet to the storage tank. I'm delivering about 18 gallons a minute to that storage tank on a bright sunny day.
We don't have a battery backup system for that, so it only runs during daylight hours, and that's why the gravity flow part of that is.
And the storage.
And so that's, Tom mentioned winter, that was a critical test where we have such short daylight during the winter. Can we pump enough water to last during the dark hours, a lot of dark hours? And we were fine. We were more than fine.
Not only for livestock, but for ourselves too.
Yeah.
It's the water system we utilize.
So let me just ask how this works. You have a storage container up there, or you let it run into an area like a pond and then it slowly drains back into the water table, or how does that? Because if so, you could just leave it on all the time, right?
It is on all the time. It fills the storage tank until it becomes full, and then there is an overflow into a pond, which also we're irrigating.
Distributes down
We can
the
go
hill.
look at it if you guys like.
I'd like to. Yeah, I know some people utilize swales and other things to help to slow the water and have it percolate into the ground,
Yeah.
but you don't want to
This
make sure.
doesn't flow at that kind of rate.
doesn't,
No,
okay.
it does just little trickling streams. It actually kind of spreads out like a spider web over the edge of that hill and just goes in the ground. This spring there was a little more runoff, but that was more from the snow runoff. It's just I don't know that it was actually all by design. It just worked out really great. We tried to do it, but
See, in the total length of the system, it's all trenched in pipe. It's at least 6 feet in the ground everywhere because of our harsh winters, and it's pretty close to 2 miles from well to storage.
so yeah.
But the water is a really important component there, and especially now. I mean, that's the one thing. If we ever have a civil war in this country, it's going to be over water, because you can't negotiate.
Yeah.
Right. So
And
every
particularly
state,
in the West, where we're it's a high mountain desert that we live in, and
There's a
And
civil
so-
war every week. Here in Silverwater.
Over irrigation water.
it is it is a major issue.
Yeah.
And there's a shortage of water, and even on an abundant year like this one, there's never a permanent excess. They may be on a given day when a flood happens or something like that. But my point is that long term, we will always be in a water deficit situation here on an average given day. So those are issues that we have to learn to deal with and manage for, and really make the best use of.
Yeah. Anywhere west of in the western half of the country now, water is an issue.
Right.
Very definitely.
Yep.
And we did have those same issues in California. They were cutting the locks on the irrigation channels periodically. So yeah, the sheriffs are really having to come down on that. And I don't know. I'm trying to think about which department that's covered under. Is that the Department of Agriculture? I don't know.
Engineers, isn't it? The water rights or
engineers.
engineers.
There's several of them.
Yeah.
The state has a role. The feds have a role. All of this and the policies that are out there are all important and critical to it, and so people need to be involved in all of this as they go forward. You know, the recent decisions regarding waters of the U.S., all of those kinds of things are extremely important to the way we operate on our individual farms and ranches. So we need to be aware of and involved in policy making decisions and where we can access these programs to help us.